Okay. Hey, welcome to class today. I'm here with some of my wonderful MBA students here at Brigham Young University. And today we're going to talk about job design and about process control. First, I have a question. What are you here for? Peter, what are you here for? A job? Okay. What kind of job do you want? A good job. What makes a good job? What kind of things do you want in your job, Peter?
I want something that's going to stretch me and has a career path that take me in the direction I want to go.
Okay. What do you mean by stretch you? Do you mean you want to like work in a gymnasium, maybe like doing calisthenics and what do they call those things?
Maybe in a different life. But I want more stretch me as in giving opportunities to grow personally, not boring.
Okay. Opportunities to grow personally, not boring. What kind of attributes would lend themselves to not boring jobs? What kind of things would you be looking for?
Dynamic variation.
You like variation?
Progression.
Yeah? What about uncertainty? Do you like uncertainty? Okay. You like uncertainty to a certain extent. So a certain amount of uncertainty there. Okay. I like this. But as long as it's a certain amount of uncertainty. But what if it was an uncertain amount of uncertainty? Would you like that? Yes. Okay. You don't like uncertainty, but you like uncertainty as long as it's certain uncertainty. Mm-hmm.
If I know which aspects are uncertain, then I can manage the uncertainty.
Okay. You know which aspects are uncertain, you can manage it. So, do you like to be able to just make decisions on the job, where you just kind of make it up yourself as you go along? Do you like that? What do they call that? What is that called where you have a job? It's kind of autonomy. Do you like autonomy? Okay. What do you like about autonomy?
I like having responsibility.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't like making decisions beyond my capability.
Okay.
That's uncertainty, I guess.
So you like making decisions, but not decisions beyond your capability. What's the range of your capability? What defines that?
I guess I would, if I felt comfortable with the decision.
Okay.
Maybe with enough time I could make any decision.
So there's something about an aspect of time that if you have enough time, you'll be able to make more decisions. Now, these concepts, as you always know in class, there's a reason why I head down a particular course of discussion here. And today we're going to talk about job design, and particularly as it relates to process control and how a process is controlled. So these comments that Peter had mentioned here, he likes things that challenge him. He likes to have some amount of autonomy, but he also likes to have some control in the process, meaning he wants to have things, kind of within the realm of what he considers his capabilities are. And these will all be integrated, and they're actually discussed in the chapter that you've read, hopefully, for today's session, which is the chapter on process design, process control and job design. Thank you, Peter. Let's see. Oops, sorry, just a second. There's always like 3 steps I have to go through to get this thing to work. Oh, come on. Oh, was it on? Oh, there we go. All right. So, process control and job design. Here's an outline of things we're going to cover in class today. We're going to cover process control first. We're going to talk about this issue that Peter brought up, coincidentally there. Now, of course, Peter is not a plant here. You actually spontaneously indicated that you like autonomy. We'll find out if Peter really does like autonomy today. I would wonder. It sounds like he may vary on that a little bit. We're going to talk about complicatedness and divergence, which were some topics in that chapter. And finally, if we have time, we'll talk about training customers and what that means to train customers and how we do it. So, first, process control. In the chapter, there was a discussion of this thing called the Triad. And let me describe this kind of from a PCN perspective. So here we have a PCN diagram with the provider and with the customer. And we have control. Remember this was back from chapter, would have been chapter 3, a long time ago, that we talked about in chapter 3, the idea of the roof of a PCN diagram represents process control. That activities that are performed in regions of independent processing, you have much more control. So the provider in this case has maximum control over those steps in the regions of independent processing. Same is true for the customers. The customers have maximum control of steps that are in their independent region of processing. But as we move into regions of surrogate and direct interaction, we have to cede some of that control. We have to share. We have to somehow or other compromise the control of the process. And we have processes that are, of course, we call that what? let's say, co-productive process. So we have co-production taking place here. Does that make sense? So what I'm going to show us today as we go through the models is we're going to see how this relationship between providers and customers, how it leads to issues of job design pertaining to process control. So let's look at an example here. Carpet cleaning. I've talked about carpet cleaning before. I think carpet cleaning is important. How can we accomplish carpet cleaning? How would we accomplish carpet cleaning, for example, over here? What would that be? What is that? Independent processing. What's that? You source the cleaner. Or this could be actually just producing carpet that is, clean itself or some cleaning material or something like that. It's like a cleaner in a bottle, a carpet cleaner in a bottle. Okay? What about here? What would this be? Carpet cleaning in the region of surrogate interaction, the provider's region. Okay? So they're cleaning the carpet for somebody in their house. What would this be here? We're doing it interactively. What would that be? Actually, that would be over here renting the cleaner. Okay? This is kind of strange, but you might actually do it together. Like maybe have a cleaning seminar. Now, this sounds like a crazy idea. I thought it was, but think about this. If somebody wants to clean their carpets and they don't know how to do it, what if somebody said, hey, I'm a carpet cleaner. I'll come to your house and show you how to clean your own carpets. So we're kind of cleaning together, helping transfer. No. Oh, I'd love to do that. Yeah, I'd like to figure out the secrets of the carpet cleaner. What I'm probably more inclined to do is hire a carpet cleaner and like spy on them as they're doing it. Okay, how do they do that there? What's their secrets? Okay, we've already talked about this one, that we could, maybe rent a cleaner, the customer do it themselves, or over here, this is the customer using their own equipment. So the idea is that we have different degrees of control. Over here, the provider has maximum control. I mean, if another example over here would be making carpets that have clean, stain-resistant stuff on the carpets, like Scotchgard or something like that. And if that's the case, the provider has absolute control over that process. They can apply the Scotchgard how, when, and where they want to. Over here, the customer has maximum control. I can clean my carpets with my new Bissell carpet cleaner, which actually looks kind of like this one here. I can clean it any time I want, the middle of the night if I want to. I can do it as fast or slow as I want. I have maximum control over here. The steps in the middle, I kind of have to compromise a little bit. In fact, actually, with my Bissell carpet cleaner, I ran out of the cleaner that came with it, so I thought, I'll just use some other cleaner. So got a little kerosene and some other things, kind of mix it together, dumped it into my carpet cleaner. They won't let you do that if you use the rental machines. So you have less control here. I didn't put kerosene in it. But I did put something else in it that was not the stuff that came with the carpet cleaner there, because I have control in the process. Does that make sense? So if we look at this, there's some trade-offs of control. We ask ourselves, which is better? Is it better for the provider to control the process? Is it better for the customer to control the process? Or is it better for us to share control? And what's the answer? It absolutely depends. And that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to talk about some of the issues this depends upon. Here's another one, selecting music. I thought this was an interesting example. How many of you like listening to music? Okay? How many of you like to pick your own music? How many of you like to have somebody else pick the music for you? Yeah, we have kind of a mix there. So we can have a situation where maybe like a radio station. Do any of you listen to radio? I'm liking radio less and less because they pick the songs, but I'm always having to flip stations and stuff. It's like, I don't like that song. And so I push the button to fast forward, and I can't get radio to fast forward. So what I do is I'll use something like maybe Pandora, which gives me a little bit of control. I can give my preferences for music, and then it actually does the picking based on those preferences. Or maybe I could hire a DJ to pick music that will kind of talk together like a music consultant there. Or maybe, what would this be? Surrogate interaction. Okay. I was thinking maybe like Spotify, where you're using their service and interacting with their technology, maybe to do that. I think actually iTunes might be really more over here even, where you have your own music collection that you may have purchased or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. So again, the same idea is process control. Do customers want control? In some cases, yes, but in other cases, they'd rather have an expert control the process. Okay, one last example, fitness design. Do we have any fitness buffs here? Is that a word, a fitness buff? It almost seems like a redundancy. Isn't it a fitness buff?
I nominate Brian Smith.
Yeah? Okay. Brian, would you be our expert today? Okay, fitness plans. Do you go to the gym, Brian? Obviously you do. All right. So when you go to the gym, who controls the fitness process you go through? Do you control it? Do they control it? Do you control it together?
I can control it myself.
You control it. Who decides what machines that you go on, how much you do on each machine and stuff like that? You make those decisions yourself.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, there is depends on what machines are available, I guess.
Okay.
There is probably some certain.
So there's the resources that are available. So you're probably in surrogate interaction. Okay? What are we assuming about Brian? He wants to control the process. What would we be assuming about him? He knows what he's doing. Okay? That he wants to control this because he feels like he has sufficient expertise for the process. However, there are some of us that, in fact, I hate to say this, but actually hurt ourselves when we go to the gym and do things on our own. That we need somebody to tell us the right way to do things and the wrong way to do things. That might like the provider to control the process. Does that make sense? So again, we have this range. We could have an exercise book here that's kind of standard offering that's produced by a fitness expert independently. We could have something like this where they're actually prescribing a fitness plan. Now, that's kind of an unusual fitness plan there, but they prescribe a fitness plan based on some diagnosis of data coming from the customers. We could have fitness plans that we're doing together. What would that be? Like personal trainer kind of thing. We could have a plan over here, maybe where you're going to the gym using their equipment and they have signs that tell you how to do things. Or over here, we can have just do it at home yourself with your own resources. So again, we have this kind of challenge that we're facing about the relationship between the customer and the provider and who will control the process. And there's not one answer for all businesses. It really does depend, as you said, on what the requirements and capabilities of the customer are in that situation. In fact, I have a video about this. Do you want to see a video? All right. We won't see it then. Then we'll see it. If it will come up here. Sorry. I should have had it queued up already. Service process design. Sorry, it's loading. Load. This is on my website. Welcome to this Prentice-Hall video on service operations management. It's my brother, my younger brother. Ultimately, all business operations can be characterized as processes, which are procedures to get work done. Even though production is founded around procedures, those procedures vary dramatically in their structure and complexity. Some procedures are rigidly structured and tell employees and customers exactly what each step should be. Other procedures are very flexible, allowing the procedure execution to vary dramatically over time. As a customer, I don't know if I like being forced into an extremely rigid procedure, but I also don't want to have a random service experience. Fortunately, there are many degrees of flexibility for companies to choose from. In this segment, we'll consider these types of process design issues in our fitness center.
One feature that is common to all business operations is that they involve processes. These are the procedures for converting inputs into outputs. Process design involves making numerous decisions about how processes should function. One issue of process design is complexity. Complex processes involve many steps and may include many contingencies. An advantage of simple processes is fewer opportunities for error. Another issue of process design is the use of automation and technology. Automated processes can be efficient, but often lack the flexibility of processes that rely more heavily on labor. This concept of process flexibility is another key element in process design. In manufacturing, flexibility means the ability to produce different items in a particular facility. Some facilities are highly flexible and can produce a wide variety of products. For example, Dell can assemble many different computer products in its plants and reconfigure the plant floor as demand dictates. Others, such as this rock quarry, have very structured processes. The rock is transported from the mine to stationary crushers in the process of creating materials for use in roadway surfaces. In service organizations, we also have the process flexibility issue. Standard services, such as restaurants, have well-defined procedures. In this case, the company often controls the process. This can result in operational efficiency. and such a structured process can be easily described with a flowchart. In other cases, the process can be quite flexible. Here, the procedures can be divergent. This means the steps of the procedure can vary dramatically based upon the judgment of employees or customers. For example, in retailing, the process steps are determined by customers. They can choose to shop for shoes first, then clothing. The only thing standard from one customer to the next is that they all enter and they all pay before leaving with purchase.
Except for the shoplifters, they don't pay.
Everything else is up to the customer. Such loosely defined self-serve processes can be difficult to describe with a flowchart. Other divergent processes are controlled by employee judgment. For example, in a health facility, every customer may have a unique process based on health needs. The process is determined by employees who tell patients what areas of the facility they need to visit. Now let's consider process design in a fitness center setting. One example of a process is the development of personal training programs. A fitness center may employ fitness consultants to set customers up on a personalized training program. Is it best for this fitness consulting process to be company-controlled, customer-controlled, or employee-controlled? If the organization wants control, managers will develop standard procedures and forms and train employees in their use. If management thinks that customers should control the process, they would instruct personal trainers to seek out and comply with customer wishes. If management wants employees to control the process, they may hire employees with education or experience in sports training. The question is, what are advantages and disadvantages of each approach in the personal training process?
All right. Brian? Have you ever thought about starting up a gym, like a fitness facility? That's kind of popular these days, right? It's like Krispy Kreme and gyms. They're both kind of, growing in the economy. You ever thought about that?
Yeah, a little bit.
If you were to start a gym that has like fitness programs, it's like fitness for students, fitness for old people, whatever like that. Which would you prefer? Organization control, customer control, or employee control?
I probably want a little bit of all three.
Okay, so it could be some blending of the three. Okay, why? Why would you want one or the other? What would be some factor that would influence this decision?
Fitness in particular, people have a lot of different levels, I guess.
Okay.
Some people that know what they're doing, other people that are just beginning and they need some help. But if you were to really have this rigorous set plan, it wouldn't fit for everyone. It's not individualized.
Okay.
If someone were to come to me and say, I want you to do, here's your trainer, if you're going to come to this gym, you have to do this. Wouldn't sit well with me. But then if there were other people that had no experience and said, here you go, they wouldn't know what to do either.
Okay. So we have different customer needs and capabilities there. So in some cases, the customers are going to need a lot of assistance. In other cases, the customers want to take a lot of control of the process themselves. So we might have to have an adaptable system. Now, the fact is, in any of these relationships, it's very difficult to manage tremendous variety there, that we might need to focus. Meaning, if a gym was trying to be everything to everybody, that's somewhat of a precarious strategy, as we've talked about that before. So if you were going to pick one of the three, what basis would you pick to favor one of the three? So admittedly, might be some hybrid, but let's think about that. What would be a reason why you want to pick organization control? What would be some advantages of organization control? Mike? Okay. Safety. So, less likely to have unusual variation in the process in a negative sense. It's kind of, okay, good. Other reasons. What are other advantages of organization control? Adam? Okay, efficiency. What do you mean by that? Okay. So you have efficiency. You design it, you meaning the organization, you design the process, kind of the idea that you design it once, and then you can just keep replicating that process over and over again. You don't have to keep redesigning it. So we talked about before the idea of economies of scale that fit in with that as well. Excellent. Was there another hand, please? Okay, customer perceptions of fairness. If it's organization control, the customers might perceive that everybody's getting the same thing. Whereas under some of the other ideas, we might perceive that other customers might be getting some advantage because they're asserting more control, or they have a better employee they're working with, and so forth. Excellent. Any other ideas, please?
Branching out what Adam said, profitability.
Mm-hmm.
So, more efficient to make it. You know, within your organization, you know what is profitable, what's not, what's more profitable, what's less profitable, as far as the services you offer.
Excellent. So profitability. Now, what aspect, Seth, of profitability is favored by organization control? Do you think you have more revenues through organization control? Revenues per customer? What is it, Dan? Yeah, it's really a cost benefit, isn't it? If it's organization control, again, coming back, like you said, to this Adam's concept of efficiency there, is if it's organization control, we can figure out a way to do it that's efficient, that's economically viable, and then we just replicate that. Whereas if we have customer control or employee control, we might lose control of the cost there, and the customers might be happy, but we don't have profitability out of that. Excellent. Okay, what would be advantages of customer control? I mean, think about a PCN diagram. What's the major advantage of a customer control of a process? Exactly. Customization. So the customer gets it exactly how they want it. For good or bad, they get it exactly what they want. Sounds like that's what Brian, you kind of like that. You know what you want, and you're going to get that. What's the disadvantage of customer control? Yeah. Okay, is customer control, is it less efficient than provider control? Think about this. What does customer control mean? I could go back to the prior slide. Customer control means they're doing it in their process domain, meaning they're doing it either at home or they're doing it at the gym. Is that going to be efficient if they do it in their own domain? Think about that, Russell. Okay, now that's a different issue. The suitedness, I would say, is an expertise issue, right? Okay, maybe that's actually at the end of our discussion today. We'll talk about customer training there. But that's a separate issue. We have one issue, which is, are the customers capable of performing it? But there's another issue, which is the issue that the customer domain dominates in, which is what? Somebody said it earlier. It's customization, right? It's getting it exactly how you want. Now, the fact is, if the customer is, I mean, think about this for yourself, Brian. Which is going to be more efficient from your perspective? To go to the gym or exercise at home? Yes.
I guess it kind of depends on what you're defining as
efficiency is low cost.
low cost,
Probably do it at home because it's there for you. You don't have to drive anywhere. You don't have to wait in line. You don't have to anything like that. You can just do it at home. So if you think, again, in a PCN diagram, the region of highest inefficiency is in the middle. But you get more efficiency either on the provider's side or on the customer's side. Now, again, the challenge is, this other issue that Russell mentioned is the customer capable of doing it? That's more of an expertise issue, meaning do they have the economies of scale to learn the skills they need to perform that function for themselves? Does that make sense? Okay, well, finally, what about employee control? What does that give us, employee control? What would be an advantage of employee control? Thoughts? Brad? Yes. So it's kind of a buffer. The nice thing about, that's a good comment, Brad. The nice thing about the employee control is we get kind of the best of both worlds, don't we? We get the expertise of the organization, their economies of scale, because the employees are hopefully trained and experts, kind of like Brian, experts in fitness. And they also, through that interaction, they're able to provide a customized experience. And in the book, the term that, I don't know if you remember from an earlier chapter, it called it, what did it call it? I don't know, I'm drawing a blank here. It's the yellow box in the middle of the PCN diagram. Expert customization. Let's call it that for now. There's a term for it in the book, so read your books. All right. Employee control is the best of both worlds. But is there a disadvantage of employee control? Please. It could be the most costly. Why? Okay. So there's salary, maybe some training costs, turnover costs might be higher with that. What else? Daniel?
Also, it's not as efficient because if you're trying to
Yes. Hopelessly inefficient there. Again, in that region of direct interaction. Excellent. Wade? So, well, that's another cost. So another a liability or a risk, the cost there is a quality cost. Is if you have an expert personal trainer, in one sense, they could give you a really great, personal training experience. In another sense, they can execute some bad judgment and cause some physical damage or something like that. So there's another cost with this. In fact, if we look at these three alternatives, this is probably the most costly alternative. Does that make sense? These are great comments here. Let me just finish the last of this video, and then we'll go back to the slides. The last of the video just summarizes comments that you made.
An advantage of a highly structured fitness consulting process is that it will be very consistent from one customer to the next. The company can design the very best process and instruct employees in each step of the process. A disadvantage of this highly structured approach is that customer needs can vary dramatically, even if the process does not. What might be an ideal fitness program for one customer might be inadequate for another. The primary advantage of a customer-controlled process is that it allows customers to get any type of fitness program they want. A disadvantage is that customers may not have enough knowledge to know what type of program would be best for their needs. Somewhat in between the rigidity of the organization control and the flexibility of customer control is a fitness consulting process controlled by employees. An advantage of the employee control process is that employees adjust the fitness program to meet individual customer needs. At the same time, they can maintain a desired level of consistency from one customer to the next. The disadvantage of this approach is that it can be the most costly in terms of labor and training. Employees need to possess sufficient expertise to use good judgment in guiding the consulting process. At Miami University's Recreational Sports Center, management has chosen to hire highly trained employees that are skilled at managing the process. This allows them to provide excellent fitness advice that meets the needs of individual customers.
All right. So, back to where we were here. Let's see. Fitness process. So, this was the model that was presented in the book. It's called the Service Encounter Triad, and it's actually a triangle, as you would imagine. So, we have company control, we have employee control, and customer control. And potentially competing objectives here. So what does the company want? Well, actually, I have a home design example here. Home design, company control. The company designs every home uniquely. Or not uniquely, the same. Sorry, the opposite there. They design all the homes the same. Employee control, you might have an expert that designs the homes based on their expertise. Or customer control, that might be customer involvement where the customer comes in and says, here's what I want, here's what I want. Things like that. Call center. Actually, this was an interesting example. I actually had a battery for an Apple computer, and it was out of warranty, but it broke. So I called up Apple to say, hey, this battery, it broke. It actually broke while it was in warranty. They sent me a new one. They sent me a new battery, and now it was out of warranty. Now, here's the question. As a customer, which would I prefer? Would I prefer customer control, employee control, or organization control of that process of warranty service? Yeah, what do I get for customer control? Yeah, so whatever I want. Yeah, my battery broke, so send me a brand new PowerBook. No, I don't know if they could do that. The customer control is a little precarious there because it might lead to some cost issues and some consistency issues. I had this thing that was called the Apple Care Protection Plan, which actually covered the product, and I had violated that. So the Apple Care itself had somewhat of an organization control. It kind of had some policies that I had to go through, time frames and things like that. I called the call center and asked them about this, and how did they respond? Anybody have any ideas? Anybody ever called Apple Care for warranty service on a product? How did it go, Cade?
It didn't go so well. I actually hadn't purchased the plan, but I still tried to get them.
Oh, okay, so you didn't purchase the plan, and you still wanted to get warranty service. Yeah. Didn't go well. How come?
Because I didn't pay the money beforehand.
Okay. Well, why did the interaction not go well? In what dimension did it not go well?
Well, that's really the only thing. They just wanted to get money out of me, but I didn't.
Okay. And then you did. You got them to help you, did you? Huh? Now, let me ask, in that process, was it customer control? Was it employee control or was it company control? What do you think? Okay. So do you think Apple has a policy if a customer calls for Apple Care service, even if they haven't signed up for it, give them whatever they want? Do you think they have a policy like that? I would wonder about that. Or could it have been... What's that? Well, that's what we'll wonder. That's what we're trying to figure out here is where's the leeway? Where does company control leave off and customer control take off? Could it be, Cade, that you were lucky and you got an employee that day that was just generous or was about to quit and said, yeah, anybody that calls today, I'm going to give them whatever they want? Is that a possibility? Is that a good thing or a bad thing for employees to exercise their judgment in that process? Yeah. It could be costly, though, but it can introduce risk. I mean, if that person would have said, no, you didn't buy the Apple Care plan, so we're not going to help you, would you consider just calling up again, trying to get a different person that might be more generous? Oh, okay. Kind of give up on that. Well, again, we have this trade-off here. Now, let me tell you what happened with mine, Kate. I don't know if you'd be surprised to hear this, but my battery was out of warranty, and they said, we'll send you a new battery, even though it's out of warranty. And I thought, and they said, we shouldn't do this, it's out of warranty. Commit that you'll go down and have your motherboard checked out because it's probably causing some problems. And they actually sent me the new battery. And at the time I thought, oh man, I'm sure persuasive here, aren't I? But then I thought, no, it's not that I'm persuasive. It's actually that I got a nice employee that day. But then I thought, how many Apple Care employees does Apple employ? Like 3 or 4 or hundreds? Yeah, probably hundreds. And if the employees are controlling the process, are they going to have any consistency? So a customer calls up one day, the next day they call up and they're not generous, you get the wrong person there, that will lead to all kinds of problems. So the fact is, the only way it's really sustainable for Apple to have a process like Apple Care like this is to have policies that indicate when employees should take one action or another course of action. Does that make sense? So the fact is, as you suggested, Kate, is they probably had policies that you were fully within those policies, even though they're not the stated policies on the documents that customers read and sign. Or I guess you didn't ever sign it, but other customers would read and sign. Peter?
Was that then company control? Because they said policies, or is it hybrid?
What do you think? What do you think? Is that company control, or is that employee control, or is it customer control? What do you think that is there for Apple's warranty service? Anybody? Please. Dan? Uh-huh. Yes. Yeah. Yes. So let's think about that. What do you think the company does? Do you think what would autonomy mean at Apple? Would autonomy mean, we'll allow anybody to give away $500 worth of stuff, no questions asked? Do you think that's what they do? Probably not. Why not? What's the problem with that type of autonomy? What would be a problem with giving employees autonomy that's just kind of carte blanche autonomy without structure? Yeah. You could give customers that don't deserve it more than customers that do deserve it. It could cause confusion among the customers about what to expect. So the fact is that they probably provide some autonomy, and I'm going to put that in quotes, but the autonomy is probably structured autonomy, meaning that they provide guidelines about when to make this decision or when to make this decision. Now we'd have to ask ourselves, is that type of autonomy employee control, or is that type of autonomy company control? What do you think, Cade? Mm-hmm.
The employee probably has some guidelines that they follow that are provided by the company, but
yeah.
You wouldn't have to follow them unless it was asked for by the customer. Like when I called in my circumstance, I hadn't purchased the Apple Care, but I asked for the service regardless.
Yes.
Customers just wouldn't ask for the service. So in that case, if they didn't ask,
yeah.
the employee's probably not going to just say, oh, well, since you called in anyway, why don't I just give you the $500 benefit?
Okay. So there might be something contextual there about if the customer asks, then we do this. If they don't ask, we don't do this. But isn't that also kind of, again, company control? They're providing a rule there that helps them make that decision. Aren't they kind of doing that? Isn't this interesting? I mean, what we see in this process is sometimes we have things that we think are maybe customer control or employee control, but they're dictated by policy. And in fact, there's a difference between autonomy and what we might consider to be empowerment, which is helping employees meet customer needs. Does that make sense? Let's talk about that some more. So why would we want to control? This is from the book. Company control. Why do companies want to control things? They want to have things be consistent, efficient, and so forth. Customers, they want satisfaction. Employees, they might want some autonomy, some ability to make decisions and exercise judgment and things like that. So this is the service encounter triad where we have efficiency, satisfaction, and autonomy, and there might be sometimes some tension between these three. Have you ever called somewhere, I haven't had this experience with Apple, but I've called other places where the employee will say, I know this is our policy to do this or this, but I'm going to violate the policy today. See, there's some tension there. I mean, my United Airlines example from the book, did you read that example? Where I went, the flight was delayed 3 hours and then canceled. I wanted to get hotel vouchers and meal vouchers. And the employee said, well, because it was weather related, we're not supposed to do anything for you, but I'm going to do something for you here. Do you see that tension? So there was some company control here, but the employee said, no, I don't agree with what the company's doing. Plus, they realized that I was probably never going to be their customer again if they continued treating me as poorly as they did. Of course, I'm completely disloyal to United Airlines now, so it's probably not much to lose from their part. Okay, what determines the best positionings and what do customers want and what do employees want? So let's talk a little bit more about this idea of empowerment. Is empowerment good or bad? So Peter said he'd like to have some autonomy in his job and some empowerment. But he also said that there's limits to that. There's some points where he doesn't want empowerment, right? And I think this is this concept that was discussed in the chapter there. So think about empowerment here. Employee control. That's what we're talking about when we talk about empowerment. Is the idea that the employees somehow or other might control the process. There's two versions of empowerment. One I call laissez-faire empowerment. That means that your employees have autonomy and they can decide what? What kind of things do you decide? Peter, what kind of things do you like to decide on the job? Okay. Things that relate, like what?
Well, if I'm working on a project, for months, I want to be able to have some say in where it goes.
Okay. Where it goes, what steps we do, what the process is, okay? Maybe even the scope of the process and things like that. What about the outcome of the process? So you have a project that you're assigned and you have to accomplish this project. Do you like to be able to make up decisions about what defines success for the project? Do you like to do that? Do you get to do that? No, you never do. So, I mean, as nice as it would be, it'd be great to say, we have this project, I don't know, maybe it's an IT project or something like that. We're going to go implement this system. We want to keep it under, this and that kind of thing. We're going to define success as being nobody's dead at the end of the project. I don't know if the upper management's going to buy that, right? So we have decisions about what to do and how to do it, but we don't get to decide the outcome standards. In most cases, we don't get to decide that. So what happens when you're allowed, okay, you can decide what you want to do, we can decide how you're going to do it, but if you don't accomplish this particular objective, you're fired. Okay? It's like this. Should we buy the maintenance plan or just take our chances? What do you prefer? This is Dilbert. I prefer to punish you for buying the maintenance plan and going over budget, but I also don't mind firing you for not buying it if we need it later. Which one of us has a better job? Okay? Again, idea of autonomy here. I think of it like this guy here. He has this big task and here's the tool that he has. He's kind of ill-prepared for this job. So I wonder if empowerment is just another buzzword, and here's again some Dilbert evidence of this. Every employee will wear a button, there you go, buzzword button, that says, I'm empowered. And this guy says, I don't want to. You have to. That was everything you need to know about life in one package. Meaning, okay, we're going to empower you, but we're not going to let you really determine your destiny. You either succeed at our financial objectives or you're fired. Okay? Unconstrained autonomy. Wally, I've been monitoring your internet usage. You've been running a side business on eBay selling office supplies. And he says, well, I guess that empowerment thing turned out to be a bunch of blah, blah, blah. Or this one, I want all of you to feel empowered on this project. You forgot to get our buy-in before you empowered us. I'll get your buy-in later. It's far too late for that. I'm going to use my empowerment to destroy this poorly conceived project from the inside. Don't do that, says the boss. So, you're saying we're not empowered to do what we think is best. Can we go back to our old system where we were afraid to make decisions and you were never available? Your eyes say yes. So, have any of you ever experienced this in a job you've had in the past, where you were kind of empowered? Yeah, I see some heads nodding here. Kind of empowered, but if you didn't meet the objectives they laid out for you, you were fired or punished or some other way like that. So I have a name for this. Working without direction. Let me skip that one. I have a name for that I'll introduce in a second. But first I want to talk about another form of empowerment that we call structured tools. Under this model, it's training focused. And what we do is we train our employees in standard operating procedures. We train them in exception handling procedures, and we give them decision authority. In this situation, the decision authority is structured. It means we have the decision of when and how to apply the standard operating procedures. So the standard operating procedures are not one size fit all, but they are based on the context and the requirements of that particular customer situation. So, how do we exercise the procedures in order to achieve outcome standards? And think of it as kind of like a tool belt here. So this one over here, laissez-faire, I call this one abandonment. It's not really empowerment. As much as we like empowerment, the fact that we can't choose the measures of our success means that if they put us in a situation and say, we're going to empower you, go out there and flounder, and if you fail, you're fired, that's abandonment. Versus the alternative, the structured tools, that's one that I think is really the true empowerment. So, the key driver of empowerment, I believe, is success. Employees want success. And what defines success for an employee, or a customer, or a firm? It's accomplishing their goals. For employees, it's the ability to satisfy needs. If employees can make customers happy, the employees will have better jobs. They'll have more fulfillment in their jobs. I think that's the Apple example, is that Apple really works hard to make sure their employees are able to be successful in their interactions with customers. Empower employees to satisfy needs. So, this is finally one quote on this. Teach employees correct principles and let them govern themselves. So the idea Joseph Smith had with that was not let people do whatever they want. That's anarchy. What he said is no, we give them principles, we give them standard operating procedures, we give them guidance, and let them then use their good judgment in applying those in their particular context. So what if there are no standard operating procedures? That actually happens in some situations. There's different jobs out there, some of which are more tightly defined than others. So this third part of this four-part class session today is on this topic of complicatedness and divergence. And I want to describe this kind of thinking about jobs. So, Peter, you said you want to get kind of a good job when you graduate. What would a difficult job be? Give me some examples of a difficult job. Okay. Well, I don't know if too easy would be a difficult job. Okay. A painful job. Okay. What about too hard? What makes a job hard?
I guess given enough time, I feel like I could accomplish any job, but something too hard right out of the gate would be something that I haven't experienced with or
okay.
training around.
Okay. Maybe no knowledge and skills that you need, experience and training. How about flying a 747? Would that be a difficult job? What about this? Air traffic controller. Well, I don't know. I think difficult. What about this? Sir Elton John, a musician. Is that a difficult job? Being a successful musical performing artist and composer? Yeah, that's quite difficult. A judge. Is that a difficult job? Maybe not a TV judge, but okay, what about an entrepreneur? Is that a difficult job? Actually, this is. I've heard that when he was alive, he was very difficult to get along with. So maybe that's a difficult job. I don't know. All right, what makes a difficult job? Well, the book talks about two things. One is complicatedness. The other is divergence. So what's the difference between complicatedness and divergence? Let's review that a little bit here. Complicatedness is defined by the number and intricacy of the steps. A complicated job has a lot of steps. But they are steps, meaning they are somewhat precisely defined. We know what the steps are. So piloting the space shuttle, very complicated, but there's a step for everything. They're not just making it up. I mean, if they ever had this on the space shuttle, it's about to take off. Hello, Houston, we're here in the space shuttle. We're about ready to go into orbit here. Hey, what's this little green button here? I wonder what that is. And, no, they're not making it up. Everything is tightly defined on the space shuttle, but it's very complicated. Now, divergence, on the other hand, has to do with uncertainty about the and decision ambiguity around the execution of the steps. And in the video, I talked about this idea that in some processes, it's not well defined. That's a divergent process. So being an entrepreneur is an example. What makes a good entrepreneur? They're successful. They have profitable businesses. How do you make a startup business be profitable? What are the steps? They're kind of undefined. It kind of, it requires judgment and things like that. So this is the idea of a divergent process. So visualizing complicatedness, here's a picture for me that kind of epitomizes complicatedness. The U.S. tax code. Okay, not a lot of opportunity for judgment there. It's pretty much 100 million rules, that you have to go through. Here's one. Here's a PCN diagram that's kind of complicated. Another one that's kind of complicated here. Okay. How do we deal with complicatedness? If we have a complicated process, well, we train. We document the process, we identify standard operating procedures, and we train our employees in those procedures. Okay? Training. Now, let's contrast that with a divergent process. Now, divergent processes don't have necessarily standard operating procedures. They don't have a set sequence of steps that they perform. How do we visualize divergence? Here's a picture. What about this? Is that a divergent job, being a head football coach? Yeah. You're hired as a head football coach. What do they tell you when they hire you? Okay, win. So they tell you the outcome. The outcome is you got to have a winning season. And then what else do they tell you? What do they tell you about how to do it? Nothing. Is there a handbook that says here's the 100 steps you go through to be a successful football coach? No, there isn't. It's a divergent process. It requires judgment. What about this? Orthodontics, dentistry. This is actually an example that was given in the book there. A lot of medical things tend to be divergent processes, In fact, actually, I saw a orthopedic surgeon last week about a shoulder injury, and I saw a different one a few months ago, and it was kind of useless. He prescribed some medication that didn't help at all. In fact, it actually made things worse. And so I went back to this orthopedic surgeon I'd used before. The interesting thing was, I went into his office, and he checked some things out, asked me about the symptoms, and I thought I'd actually had some numbness in my hand. I thought it was because of a shoulder injury I had about 5 months ago. And when I described all the symptoms to him, he said, I don't think that's your shoulder. He said, tell me about where you work. And I said, I work at BYU. He says, well, tell me about your desk. And I told him about my desk. I said, well, actually, coincidentally, I just changed offices and got a new desk a couple months ago. And that's when I started having the numbness in my hand. He said, well, you need some ergonomics there. It was completely outside of the context I'd been thinking. He was executing his judgment based on his past experience with this, and instead of prescribing some useless medications, as the other physician I saw, or quote-unquote physician I saw, did, he actually used his judgment to give something that was really skillful customization. That's the phrase I was looking for before. Skillful customization. So he applied skillful customization. He didn't apply a pat answer, whereas the other guy that I saw, who was like a young guy, he just told me a textbook answer, and it didn't help my problem. Does that make sense? Okay. Visualizing it, the book talks about this. I'm not going to go through it now, but where is divergent? In this process step here. We represent one step with rounded borders to represent that. How do we deal with divergence? Can we train people in divergence? Somewhat? No, you can't. Because what will you train them on? What do you train? You hire a new football coach. What would you train them on? You know what? You gotta hire people with divergent skills. Or if you train them, you're basically going to go through some type of an internship program or some other type of program that takes a significant amount of time. But you can't take them and say, go to this seminar for 3 weeks and be able to do that job. Please, Brad?
So would you then say that the ability to feel and handle divergence is a nature versus nurture type thing? You're just born with it. You can either do divergence or you can't.
Nature versus nurture. Where do you get the ability to make decisions in ambiguous situations? Where do you get that ability? That's where you get it from your experience. So if you say nature versus nurture, if it's nature, it's probably you got it in the pre-earth life, in prior experience. But this idea is that if we're going to exercise judgment, we have to have significant experience in similarly ambiguous situations, and over time we develop our judgment ability. Does that make sense, Brad? Excellent, Brad. So the comment was that the MBA program, why do we go through case studies? The reason we do is because that gives surrogate experience there. By making those decisions in that process, we think, well, we're doing a case study on a cranberry factory. I'm never going to work in a cranberry factory. I'm going to go work in a bank. But in fact, there are principles that might, managing capacity or something in a cranberry factory, that you might be able to apply in some ambiguous situation in a bank as well. That's exactly why we use the pedagogy that we do. Does that make sense? Yes, but do you think somebody's going to hire you and then on the job they're going to give you 2 years of experience? In fact, actually, what makes the MBA program different from the undergraduate program? What's your undergraduate degree, Brad? Okay, well, does anybody have... Okay, somebody that has a business undergraduate program, because I was going to ask the difference between them, but you're going to have lots of differences between that. Does anybody have a business undergraduate degree? Russell? What's the difference between your undergraduate degree in business and your MBA in business? What's the difference? Is that right? Yeah? So it's pretty much the same. Now what about salary differences? Are they the same? That doesn't make sense there. If it's the same program, why would the MBAs make double or more than what the undergraduates make? What experience? Wait a second. Are you saying we don't give it to you? We're admitting people into the MBA program that already have experience, and we're just turning them around. We're treating them pretty much the same as we treat the undergraduates, but the end result is they're twice as valuable? Is that what you're suggesting? It's true. Isn't that interesting? The primary difference between a good MBA program, like BYU's, and an undergraduate degree, the primary difference is experience. That people come in with experience, and then don't we actually spend more time sharing experience as well? Don't I sometimes ask people about what they've done or where they've been before? And yeah, we do a lot of that because we draw on that experience, which may be in somewhat unrelated to my particular job interests or Peter's job interests, but by sharing that experience, we're able to then build our ability to make decisions in ambiguous situations. Does that make sense? And what we're suggesting here is that experience that people bring into the MBA program, coupled with an education process like case methods that kind of draw on that experience and build it further, that more than doubles the salary or the value of that person to their employer. And that's the concept here. Is divergent thinking is very costly because it's rare. And the reason it's rare is because you have to hire people with it. Now, Brad, admittedly, you could hire people and give them that experience, but for most organizations, that takes so many years. Probably the best example I can think of is like, working as an electrician, where they hire people as a apprentice and they have them work for 5 years to get that experience, but they pay them a pittance. And if they stick with it, then they become, at some point, a journeyman. Maybe accounting firms. A lot of accounting firms hire people not for their judgment ability, but just to sit in a cubicle and push numbers. And if eventually they get enough experience that they're able to make judgment decisions, they make them, what do we call that? A partner. And what's the salary difference between a partner and a junior associate? It's like 10 times different. Does that make sense? So what they basically do is they hire people. Now, even though companies can do that, most companies can't afford to have these big kind of internship get experience programs. Most organizations, if you have judgment needs, you have to be able to hire for it. For judgment ability based on experience. Well, I have plenty of experience at filling out job applications. That's not what we're talking about. All right. It's often very costly. So let's look at some differences here. Complicatedness and divergence, rule-based, can be trained and can be automated. Versus divergent is judgment-based, requires experience, and much more costly. To illustrate that, let's look at a brief airline example. This relates to the example that was in the book. So what about a flight attendant? Is that complicated, meaning there's a lot of steps, but they're tightly defined? Or is it divergent? Or is it both? Or neither? Is it complicated? No, not really. Is it divergent? No, okay. What about negotiating an aircraft purchase contract? Is that complicated? Not really. Is it divergent? Very divergent. What about aircraft maintenance, maintaining the engines of an aircraft? Is it complicated? Yeah, pretty complicated. I mean, there's a ton of parts there. Is it divergent? No, it's not. In fact, I have evidence to show that it's actually not divergent. It's all rule-based. There are manuals and instructions for almost everything. What about this? Merging the operations of two airlines. Is it complicated? Oh, yeah. A lot of details. What about divergent? Oh, interesting. So the model in the book showed some things can be low divergence and low complicated. Some can have high divergence. They're kind of two different dimensions. They both make the job difficult, but the divergence dimension is much more costly. And as evidence of this, let me show you something here. Oh, first let me ask you, what about an airline pilot? Is flying a 747 or a 737, is it complicated or divergent or both or neither? Is it? Is it complicated and divergent? It's kind of yes and no. On a good weather day, it's fine. Okay, on a dangerous day, now this is interesting because there was a day where flying planes, which required just lots and lots of experience, plus lots of knowledge and skill, but also a lot of experience like that. Is that day to day? Let's look at some evidence here. Somebody sent me this recently. This is from the Wall Street Journal from early 2014. And it shows base salaries. It's a first-year base salary and fifth-year salary for different jobs. First, a co-pilot of a regional airplane, what do they start at? A co-pilot. $22,000 a year. That's almost the same as you start at working at McDonald's. Is that a complicated or divergent job? It's complicated maybe, but it's definitely not divergent. They are not paying people for their judgment ability. A co-pilot of a major airline, it gets up to this thing. In the book, I think I actually talked about back in probably 1984, 1985, I actually flew in the cockpit of a 737 or similar plane. Was that in the book? And it talked about, I was talking to these people about how much they got paid. How much did they get paid per year back in the early 80s? $250,000 a year if you're a pilot of a plane. And in the book, I describe how really it's mostly just running the autopilot there. I thought, man, what a cushy job. A lot's changed since then. In fact, what they've discovered is flying a plane is 99.9% complicated and only 0.1% divergent. Interestingly enough. Okay? Look at this. Flight attendant, starting salary $16,000. You stay with it, you can make it up to $24,000. A mechanic, starting salary. Now, in your MBA program, how many of you are aspiring to make 37 starting out of your MBA program? Okay? It's pretty complicated, but they're not hiring people for their judgment ability here. So, think about this. What's the starting salary for somebody that negotiates purchasing contract, a supply chain professional? What do you think the starting salary is for that kind of job? Yeah, at least $100,000 a year. What about the starting salaries for CEOs, if you call that a starting salary? Yeah, 1 to 12 million, not $1, but, 1 to 12. Okay, what about airline pilots? What about an airline pilot? What are they paid for? Are they paid for complexity? Or are they paid for that 1 out of every 10,000 times where they have to exercise judgment? See, if we were paying for this, how much would they make a year? A lot of money a year. But you know what? The data shows that over time, especially with the regional carriers, they're paying for complicatedness. In fact, I actually have a cousin who grew up on a farm. He was a really bright kid, and he didn't want to stay on the farm, wanted to move off, and he went to work for a regional carrier. Went down to a program, even here in Utah, you can go down to Utah Valley University, go through the course of study, get some practice flight training hours, and you can become a pilot on one of these planes just in relatively short order. It's kind of interesting. All right. Managing it, last few slides here. Rule of thumb, avoid relying on divergence when complexity is adequate because it's very costly. I'm going to skip through this part here. This is actually stuff that's in the book. And also, even when it's difficult to provide a complicated job description, meaning that complicatedness, as difficult as it is, it's manageable. Divergence, on the other hand, can be very expensive, but in some cases it might be necessary. So our goal in job design, as Peter kind of alluded to at the beginning, is to identify what parts of the job can be turned into standard operating procedures that are manageable, and then understanding at the margin what parts of the job we have to require the employees to exercise judgment. If we require the employees to exercise too much judgment, they're going to be frustrated because they're not going to be able to be successful. But if they can't exercise enough judgment, perhaps if it's too rigid, we're not going to be able to satisfy customers. Does that make sense? All right, we'll continue this discussion on Wednesday.